Whoa. Before we get started, what I need you to do right now is if you're watching this video live, click the settings, that little gear icon, then hit playback speed and then the number 2. It's gonna speed up my voice, but what that's gonna do is make it so you're caught up to the live broadcast. Now that you've done that, hit like. Congratulations, you're watching live with the rest of us. Enjoy today's message. What is up, everyone? Even though this isn't live, I want you guys to answer this question. What are some of your all-time favorite movies or shows? While you guys are answering that in the chat, I'm just gonna go get some coffee or something. I'll check in with you in a minute. Wow, that's my favorite movie too. Does this feel like an episode of Blue's Clues yet? One thing that makes almost any movie or TV show great is if you like the main character. Writers do everything in their power to make you like the main character so you can keep watching the show. One of the things a good writer does is giving the character depth, and they do this by giving you good sides of them and bad sides of them. Seeing both the good and the bad things that a character does makes you empathize with them. It makes them feel like a real person with real feelings who makes real mistakes. A lot of times a movie will show a character's depth by giving you a backstory. They'll cut to a backstory as a way to show you something that happened to this character before you met them. It helps you see a different side to the character you're watching. A famous great example of this is Darth Vader. Before you know who Darth Vader is, he's a menacing, evil character. And while that still might be true after you know who he is, getting to see who Darth Vader was and watching him grow up gives you a deeper understanding of who his character was supposed to be. A good main character has a nuanced backstory. There's depth to the character. That's what makes them so compelling to watch. But sometimes when you're watching this happen on screen, it can feel kind of random. What I mean by that is when you're watching this intense chase as a father is looking for the person who kidnapped their daughter, and then all of a sudden it cuts to them arguing in the kitchen. I know for me at least, I'll look at the screen and be like, what's happening? Why are we missing the action right now? Chances are, you've probably felt that way living your own life. You find yourself asking those same questions. Wait, what's happening? What's the point of me going through this? Today we're talking about difficulties, pain, struggles, the problems that you and I go through. The problems that one day are gonna be part of our backstory. But as for now, they're in the middle of our current story. And when we're in the middle of something that's gonna be our backstory, it can be kind of rough. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about the question, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Today we're gonna be talking about what to do when people make fun of you, when a friend or a family member passes away. Your learning disability makes everything for you so much more difficult. Your parents' divorce is really starting to get to you. In other words, the heavy stuff, the real life stuff, the painful stuff. And honestly, before we even ask ourselves what to do, usually we find ourselves asking, why? Why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this right now? Just like a movie that flashes back to a scene that doesn't seem to make any sense at the moment, difficulties can make us feel the same way. Difficulties often feel random, pointless, or unnecessary. Sometimes we see the point after something happens, when we realize that this is part of our backstory. Maybe you have a broken friendship, but looking back, you realize that the friendship led you to make some pretty bad decisions. And unlike that clip, you're kind of glad that some of the things that you guys did weren't filmed. And other times we see the point of our difficulties in the moment. Maybe you find yourself struggling in sports or in your band, and it was your fault. You weren't putting in the effort, you weren't rehearsing enough, you weren't practicing hard enough until your coach or your section leader calls you out on it. Because of that, you're actually starting to practice more, and while it wasn't fun, it was for the best. And it's great when one of those two things happens, but usually, when something doesn't feel good, it feels pointless. We've all gone through things that just felt pointless in the moment. Whether it was not making the team, not getting the part you wanted in the show, struggling with family or friend drama, going to the kitchen and not finding anything in the fridge. Okay, that last one's me being dramatic, but it's a real problem sometimes. We've all asked ourselves, why me? And if you're like me, there usually aren't that many good answers in the moment. But when we find life confusing or difficult, we can actually learn what to do by looking at people who have handled similar situations, which brings us back to the life of Joseph. So we've been looking at some of the events in Joseph's life. The account that we have of his journey is found in the Old Testament, which is just the part of the Bible before Jesus was born. So in my best artistic ability, I'm gonna give you a quick little recap. Joseph was sold into slavery by his own brothers. He was taken to a foreign country, Egypt, where he was forced to work for a high-powered official, and then he was falsely accused of doing something he didn't do and was thrown into prison. From being a free man to a slave to a prisoner, if anybody, and I mean anybody, had the right to ask, what is the point of what I'm going through? It would be our man Joseph. And that's where we pick up. Joseph is in jail for a crime he didn't commit, and in this place he makes some new friends. Let's look at this verse. Sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined.
Pharaoh is the boss of all of Egypt. So if he got mad at you and wanted you thrown in prison, he would put you into prison whether or not you broke a law, even if you hadn't done anything illegal. And that's what happened to these two guys. They were thrown into prison with Joseph. The story continues.
After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in the master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" "We both had dreams," they answered, "but there is no one to interpret them." Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams."
There's a lot happening here. And remember, Joseph is in prison for a crime he didn't commit. But look at this, even in this difficult time, Joseph chose to honor God. The men told Joseph their dreams, and then Joseph, with the help of God, was able to interpret the dreams, and what he interpreted came true. Everything he told the men came true. He told the cupbearer that he was going to return to a favorable position, and later he did. He told the baker, "You're not going to be so lucky." And the baker wasn't. Listen, I would love for you to go back and read the full telling of this story. Go to the book of Genesis and read exactly what happened here. There's something so powerful about diving into the text on your own and really getting into what Joseph went through. In the description below, if you're on mobile, click the YouVersion link and it'll open up your Bible app and take you straight to this chapter. If you're not on mobile, click the link right below that and it'll open up Genesis on your computer. Seriously, it's worth the read. But you would think that given the circumstances, this cupbearer would go back to the Pharaoh and say like, "I just want you to know that I was locked up with this dude and he is worth the hire." But that's not what happened. The story tells us that the cupbearer completely forgot about Joseph. He got out of jail and went on with the rest of his life. As time went on, I'm sure Joseph was just waiting for the day for Pharaoh to come get him out of jail and hire him. But what I really think he was thinking was probably, okay, if this didn't work, if nothing comes out of this, what was the point of that? God, why did you put me in this jail and then show me a potential way out and then not give it to me? If I was Joseph, that's what I'd be asking. But then 2 years later, Pharaoh had two dreams that troubled him. He was desperate. He looked everywhere to find a dream interpreter who could tell him about these two troubling dreams. And that's when the cupbearer remembered Joseph. Again, please go read the full chapter in your free time. But what happens next is Pharaoh gets Joseph out of jail. He interprets the dreams. They are interpreted perfectly. And over time, Joseph just climbs the political ladder until he is the second-hand man to Pharaoh. You can see why I want you to go read it. That's a pretty big fast forward we just took. What ends up happening is there's this terrible famine, and under Joseph's leadership, they survive. All of Egypt survives because of Joseph's amazing gifts and reliance on God. This famine would have most likely even killed Joseph's family. It was 2 full years before the cupbearer remembered Joseph. But here's what I need you guys to understand. Just because he was promoted did not mean his life was great. It didn't mean his life was back the way he wanted it to be. Even though Joseph was second in command to Pharaoh, that didn't mean that just at the drop of a hat, Pharaoh couldn't throw him in jail.
You're stealing, right to jail. You're playing music too loud, right to jail, right away. You're driving too fast, jail. Slow, jail. You're charging too high prices for sweaters, glasses, you right to jail. You undercook fish, believe it or not, jail. You overcook chicken, also jail. Undercook, overcook. You make an appointment with the dentist and you don't show up, believe it or not, jail, right away.
So no, things aren't perfect for Joseph. But if we follow the context and the backstory of Joseph, we can see that God used his problems to position himself in a place that he could push forward God's plan for him. His unique, weird, intricate, awful, horrible backstory led to something amazing. And the same is true for you and me. Hard things are gonna happen in our lives, but that doesn't mean it was something that God was doing to you or a bad situation that God wanted to push you through. Because of sin, things that aren't unfair happen. People hurt each other and create systems of hurt that just will never make sense to people like you and me. But when it seems like nothing good can come from a situation, just know that God is able to do the impossible. Let's look at a Bible verse that proves that.
And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose.
Trust me, I know that doesn't fix everything. I know that doesn't make you feel better necessarily. But God is in the business of taking the things that have hurt us and turning them into something beautiful. That means if something evil was done to hurt us, he can turn it into something good. And not just for us, but the people around us. Remember, when you don't know what to do, your problems can position you for a purpose. This doesn't mean that everything is just fixed like that and everything's gonna go back to normal. It just means we can leave room for God to tell a story through our circumstances. It means we can have confidence in God's ability to redeem things. It means that bad stuff doesn't get the last word. The hardest and worst things that we go through are not the end of our story. And while this message doesn't fix everything, here are 2 things that we can do when we're going through a season or a circumstance that is hurting us. Remember that no one else has your life story. Your circumstances, while they aren't fun, are unique to you. And while yes, you aren't the only person who's ever struggled with whatever you're struggling with, you're the only person in your shoes going through your exact circumstances. And while that actually doesn't feel the most comforting to hear, what that means is God has put you in a situation where you specifically can grow from a very unique set of circumstances. You are going to be shaped in a way that nobody else is able to be shaped in, and that really leads us into our next point. Remember that your story can interact with others. Like I said, no one has your life story, but that doesn't mean that our stories can't intermingle. Because of your experiences, you might be the perfect voice for somebody else who can't articulate the way they're feeling. You might be able to help someone in a way that they would have never thought possible because of something that you've been through. Just a couple quick examples might be when you go through family drama, you can help people who are going through family drama. When you go through a rough breakup, you can be there for your friend when it happens to them. When you're dealing with sickness or an injury, you can encourage someone who's going through the same thing and tell them that even though it hurts now, something better will come. When you have big doubts in your faith, just know that you aren't alone in your story. There are people in your life who can speak into that if you invite them to do so. The truth is, the next best thing to having someone fix our problem is walking through it with us. And someone can really only walk with us step for step if they've been through the same thing we've been through. And just know you'll be able to do that for someone someday soon too. Even with small groups being on Zoom, you have a leader who has gone through hurts that will more than likely be able to speak into your life. They can use their experiences and their more time on earth to speak into something that you might be going through right now. Joseph went through some serious pains that felt pointless. Living day by day, like we said, there's no way Joseph realized that this was going to be part of his backstory. But God took his impossibly bad situation and used it for something so good down the road. We're going to talk about the details of that next week, but for now I need you to understand this. If he could do it with Joseph, he could do the same with you. So I'm going to close with a question. What if the hurt you're going through right now is setting you up for something that you can't even imagine? What if, like Joseph, God is using this awful season of yours for something beautiful? And what if the first step truly is asking for help? I'm so glad you guys tuned in today, whether you're watching live with us or watching this at a later point. Reach out to your small group leader today. Don't go through hurt alone. And with that, have a great rest of your day.